welcome to Inside Cancer Careers, a podcast from the National Cancer Institute, where we explore all the different ways people fight cancer and we hear their stories. I'm your host, Oliver Bogler from NCI's Center for Cancer Training. Today, we're talking with Dr. LeeAnn Bailey, Branch Director of the Community Outreach, Research and Engagement Branch in the Center to Reduce Cancer Health Disparities at NCI, and head of the brand new Early Onset Cancer Initiative for the NCI. Listen through to the end of the show to hear our guest make an interesting recommendation and where we invite you to take your turn. And of course, we're always glad to hear your feedback on what you hear and suggestions on what you might like us to cover. The show's email is ncicc@nih.gov. Welcome, Dr. Bailey. Welcome, LeeAnn.
Hello. Thank you so much. Really excited about this opportunity and conversation.
Thank you. I'd like to start with your newest role, leading the NCI's Early Onset Cancer Initiative. Can you just define for us as a starting point, what is early onset cancer?
Absolutely. So, early onset cancer is defined as cancers diagnosed in patients from the ages of 18 to 49 years old. And they're typically diagnosed in older adults, but in this instance, it's for earlier cohorts. And this is in contrast with AYA, or cancer in adolescents and young adults, which include pediatric cancers that are diagnosed in young adults. We're still working to understand all the trends in early onset cancers, but we know that certain cancers have significantly increased in frequency over the past decade. Examples are colorectal cancer.
So that presumably is what prompted the NCI to form an initiative around this topic.
Yes. Although I would add that NCI has been tracking EOC, or early onset cancer, for over 10 years. And what's been observed is a steady and significant spike in cancers that are typically found in older adults occurring in young people with seemingly no family history or comorbidities. So, over the past decade, NCI has supported over 30 intramural and 25 extramural early onset cancer projects under our purview. And the majority of the NCI designated cancer centers have also dedicated many efforts to this disease as well. So, there are other institutes and organizations who have been tracking and trying to better understand and respond. But due to the complex nature and time constraints, there's really a big need to accelerate scientific discovery. Our goal is to reduce early onset cancer incidence and improve survivorship.
Right. So I get it. It's kind of a big, gnarly problem. The NCI is well positioned to tackle it.
Mhm.
Want to just drill down a little bit on the demographics. So is it like a 10-year shift in earlier onset, or what kind of a shift are you seeing? And is that sort of the same for all the different cancers involved?
So, we see different trends in different cancers and in different populations. So, for example, we are seeing an increased incidence of specific types of aggressive breast cancers, such as triple negative breast cancer in Black women. However, we're also seeing that those with Hispanic heritage are most likely to be diagnosed with early onset gastric cancer.
This effort has just started. I've seen it written about as it being in the nascent phase. Help us understand what it takes to establish such a big effort at an institution like the NCI.
Right. So I was asked by our director, Dr. Kim Rathmel, to lead this initiative for NCI. And it involves a lot of coordination. And it's not just with our agency's leadership, but with program experts across the entire institute. External partners are really key to this initiative, and also patients, providers, and caregivers, because they are actively involved and provide critical insight and perspective. Ensuring that we're communicating effectively and reaching out to the appropriate groups continues to be an evolving but welcome challenge. We want to ensure that everyone has a voice at the table. And as anyone new to NCI will tell you, NCI is a big place.
Mm.
We have brilliant scientists with a variety of different expertise areas working on every aspect of cancer research that you can imagine. So, learning about the opportunities across the entire institute and figuring out where we can focus or leverage programs to build up EOC efforts has really been an exciting challenge.
I'm glad it's exciting because it seems difficult. um, so I'm sure in this work, it's important to include the voice of the patient and the caregivers. And I'm wondering whether that's part of the vision of this work that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping patients and caregivers at the center of the initiative is really a top priority for us. Our first major meeting for the initiative is actually going to be a listening session with patients, representing all of the cancer types that we're looking to target in this first phase. And we want to make sure that all of our program leaders who will be contributing to the initiative really understand what patients' primary concerns are so that we can be responsive to those needs. NCI has several established relationships with patient and advocacy groups, and we are enlisting and querying as many as we can to really bring their perspectives and ideas to this effort.
So I want to sort of talk a little bit about the biology or the clinical picture. I was wondering whether any underlying factors are already emerging. You mentioned some ongoing research project. Do we have a feeling for what's going on? Are these environmental influences? Do we know?
So, we don't know all of the reasons that we are seeing these trends, but we suspect that there is some environmental exposure or a combination of exposures, even that's contributing to the increased incidence. It might be something in the food we eat, or how people are sleeping and exercising less than they used to. We also know that there's a substantial amount of heterogeneity in these cancers in the tumor burden, which means that we're really seeing a lot of differences in the tumors that the patients are developing. So it may be that different risk factors and a variety of combinations of environmental and genetic risk factors are playing a role here. And we do see this shift in certain cancers more than in others. So there's a lot of work to be done. But for the first phase of the initiative, we're going to be focused on a subset of cancers that appear to be associated with higher body mass, if you will.
Okay.
Colorectal cancer, pancreatic, endometrial, liver, gallbladder, gastric, and multiple myeloma. And we're also focusing on kidney cancer and premenopausal breast cancer because we do understand that metabolic dysregulation plays a key role in each of these cancers.
Yeah, but that's quite a list. That's a big
Yes, sir.
field, if you will. Yeah,
Uh huh.
yeah. And so I wonder within that, as you because it's such a big field, you probably have to do some picking and choosing of what to think about or what to address. I wonder if there are some particularly sort of promising areas of research that you're focused on, maybe in prevention or early detection or related areas.
So, in thinking about this in terms of public health, we really want to be able to identify which patients are at the most risk of developing early onset cancers and determine when and how they should be screened. So, NCI does a lot of work in developing the evidence that's in use to inform cancer screening guidelines through programs like CISNET, the Cancer Intervention and Surveillance Modeling Network, a consortium that uses simulation modeling to improve our understanding of cancer control interventions in prevention, screening, and treatment, and their effects on the population trends and incidence and mortality. We are also very interested in the tumor biology and the factors that drive perhaps these cancers in different populations in different ways.
Interesting. Yeah. So there's a lot of basic science that needs to be done, but at the same time, we need to keep an eye on what's going on at the population level, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that makes it challenging. Um, Part of this is also awareness, right? You've already addressed, BMI and exercise levels and other things that are, I'm going to say, at least have a public awareness component, right, in terms
Mhm.
of trying to tackle them. So, what is the vision for this early onset initiative that you're leading in terms of how do we bring in or how do we raise awareness amongst the general public and also healthcare providers about this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And we really think about NCI supported research that's led to updates, right, in the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force screening guidelines for both breast and colorectal cancer, which lower the age for people to start screening. We want to continue to do this type of population based screening research to identify when we need to start screening for cancers without causing harm to patients through unnecessary medical procedures. So every medical breakthrough really has its foundation in basic science. And I feel that investigators are learning more and more every day about how cancer develops and spreads. And these insights give us new ideas about therapies to prevent and treat. So, for example, decades of research into mutations in the RAS family of genes, some of which occur with really high frequency in early onset colorectal cancer, have led to recent FDA approvals of KRAS inhibitors. And just this past June, the FDA did grant accelerated approval to one of these drugs for advanced CRC. So, although we have a mandate and definitely a commitment to informing, we also are going to be looking to our federal partners at agencies like CDC, HRQ, and CMS to help us get the word out. And one goal of the initiative is specifically to work with professional societies to develop guidelines for primary care providers of how to work with patients concerning red flag symptoms, if you will. So, for example, what types of screening and tests should you consider for a patient in her 20s who presents to her family doctor with abdominal pain and rectal bleeding? So, having guidelines like this will help patients get diagnosed sooner and also may make their disease easier to treat.
Yeah, I mean, you've raised several things there that I think are really important and interesting. So I'm going to do them backwards. So the last thing you said made me think that there's probably a lot of unevenness in how this is happening in our country, right? The early onset shift may not be happening equally in all populations, right? By geography, by socioeconomic status,
Mhm.
healthcare access, and things like that. Is that do you anticipate that?
We absolutely do. We're very interested in the demographics in different populations, as well as rurality and the social determinants of health, as you just alluded to. Examining disparities is critically important. And looking at these racial and ethnic groups, along with the others that I've just mentioned, is critical for improving not only the standard of care, but also for developing new therapies that are tailored for reducing cancer health disparities. And this appears to be of substantial importance in cancers like CRC, for example.
Yeah, yeah, and you mentioned the KRAS initiative, which I think is a really a shining example of a long endurance basic
Mhm.
science investment, right? That initially, a lot of people when KRAS was first identified were, oh, this is going to lead to major breakthroughs, and then many years of disappointment. But NCI stuck with it, and now it's yielding results in terms of FDA approved therapies, as you mentioned, which might feed back positively into this. So, I guess another challenge in the early onset cancer initiative is to keep an eye on all these different things that are going on and see if they can be pulled in.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point in that we really do need to have that continuity, as you mentioned, right? Not only through individual investigations, through RO1s, but also through larger programs. By thinking creatively and really plugging into the fantastic work that's already underway, I really see opportunities to strengthen that for many of the activities. And then the other piece that I guess I'd like to mention is with regard to a few of the programs that we have that I'd like to highlight, the clinical trials infrastructure provides a great platform as well, specifically the National Clinical Trials Network and the NCI Community Oncology Research Program. And ensuring that they're set up to include early onset cancer patients where it's applicable from a scientific perspective is definitely a place where we could leverage existing infrastructure and programs. So, examining and identifying what biospecimens and genomic data we already have in our repositories is also a critical component. So, perhaps leveraging these biospecimens that are collected through the NCI supported trials and the Cancer Data Research Commons can encourage investigators to be more collaborative and come up with some of these amazing breakthroughs. So, one of the questions is how do we enhance the collection and the sharing of data amongst our investigators?
Yeah, yeah. And it almost seems to me like you're taking a fresh lens, the early onset lens, if you will, and looking at some of the things that exist already that have already been invested in and seeing if they can be relevant in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. We are committed in every capacity to really ensuring that we are bringing all of our efforts to bear and not creating silos, rather breaking them down.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, we have investigators in very diverse, multidisciplinary settings that are all coming together to really, if you will, re examine where we can make strides as a community in this effort.
So you're just getting going with this very exciting and important project. What are your hopes for the future? If I could entice you to project maybe a couple of years or several years down the road, where would you hope that this initiative will be?
Absolutely. So, it is an effort that's in its early stages, but when we asked patients to share their experiences with early onset cancers, they kept coming back to wanting to be present, to do the good things happening in their lives. So they wanted to be thinking about their careers, planning their weddings, taking their kids to basketball practice, if you will, not dealing with the side effects of cancer treatment or worrying about dying. So, if we can alleviate some of the stress and anxiety that early onset patients have to deal with, we haven't even really touched upon financial toxicity and all the challenges associated with that. In some instances, this generation is also taking care of elderly parents that might have a cancer diagnosis of their own. So, having more insight and enabling better survivorship outcomes is absolutely a goal, both short term as well as long term. And then the other point that I really wanted to make sure that I touch upon with regard to that is there's substantial value in having clinicians and scientists intentionally study this group. So, studying EOC really allows researchers to understand the unique biological mechanisms behind cancers developing at a younger age, potentially leading to the development of better prevention strategies, earlier detection methods, and tailored treatment options specifically for young parents, while also highlighting the need for targeted support both for the social and psychological impacts of a cancer diagnosis at a younger age. In the words of Dr. Rathmel, what you pay attention to grows. So ultimately, what we'd really like to be able to learn is how do we prevent these cancers? And for those that we can't prevent, I really hope that we improve early diagnosis and find effective, less toxic treatments that really enable patients to get back to living their lives. The ultimate goal of this is really to see patients thrive, not merely survive.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, I'm so excited for this work to happen and have its impact. I'm a 12-year cancer survivor myself, and I like to think of myself as thriving. And I wish it for all people who are diagnosed, particularly those who are diagnosed so early in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that the message really resonates because I don't know of very many people who haven't either been personally affected by cancer or have it um, be a great factor for those that they love and care for. So, involved in that, in addition to patients, are also the caregivers. I think that's a really great point, family and friends, as well as providers. And
Yeah,
there are a lot of people who play a role in patient care.
yeah,
So, very pleased, right, to treat this in ways that perhaps weren't conceived 12 years ago,
yeah, yeah.
right, to enable that. And so pleased to hear of your status.
Thank you. So, if people want to follow along with this exciting work, I'm guessing there's going to be an NCI website focused on it that they can track.
Yes. I think at this point, we're still trying to figure out what's the best and most
Okay.
effective way to communicate. So,
Okay.
right now, I am the one stop shop and happy to engage and have conversation and collaboration because I really do believe that everyone has a voice that's critically important to contribute to this initiative.
Okay, we'll put that contact info in the show notes. And well, I certainly wish you nothing but tremendous success with this work.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Dr. Bailey's career and learn how she got to be where she is today.
Calling all global cancer researchers. Now is the time to share your original research designed to reduce the burden of cancer in low and middle income countries. Submit your scientific session and abstract proposals for the 13th Annual Symposium on Global Cancer Research today. From exploring cancer health disparities to implementing and evaluating evidence-based cancer control interventions, ASGCR provides a forum for investigators to share science-based initiatives for cancer control. Know an outstanding professional who embodies virtue and eminence in cancer research, training, or practice? Nominate them for the Rachel Perline Award and recognize their notable contributions to global oncology. The deadline to submit proposals for abstracts, sessions, and Perline Award nominations is January 17, 2025. Visit events.cancer.gov/cgh/ASGCR to learn more. Keep up with new and innovative research in global oncology at the bi-monthly Global Cancer Research and Control Seminar Series, returning in 2025. Learn from investigators and cancer control experts working around the world and engage in conversations on approaches to addressing cancer morbidity and mortality. Find more information about the Global Cancer Research and Control Seminar Series, new funding opportunities, cancer control resources, and more on the NCI Center for Global Health website, cancer.gov/global health. That is cancer.gov/global health.
Okay, and we're back. My favorite question, as always, LeeAnn, is what first sparked your interest in science?
So I am a native of Missouri and a farm girl. And my father grew up on a farm, and we were completely immersed in all aspects of biology. And so I was always fascinated to see how it is nature happened, to pick that apart, so on and so forth. And so I was always the one who was eager to put two things together to see what would happen, right? To the cause and effect
Yeah.
and the ability to influence that or not influence that. And so that translated to that same curiosity when I began attending regular public school. And
Mm-hmm.
I had some fantastic elementary school teachers that really indulged and encouraged our curiosity. And so once I had a few experiments underneath my belt, baking soda and vinegar, it was all over.
Fantastic. And so help us understand the path from these early experiences to your work in cancer research. How did you become focused on cancer?
So, unfortunately, our family is disproportionately affected by cancer incidents.
Hmm.
All of the women on my paternal side have passed away of cancer at very early ages. An
Oh,
aunt who passed at 42, both of
wow.
my great grandmothers, as well as my grandmothers.
Hmm.
And so, wanting to be able to make a change, make a difference, and help them not only navigate the healthcare system, but also specifically focused in on cancer was something that was near and dear to my heart and continues to be.
So you really started on the basic research end of things, right? You did a degree in biochemistry, if I remember correctly.
Correct. Hmm.
And tell us more about that.
So it's a bit of a funny story. So again, I have a diverse background as well. I attended Millikan University in Decatur, Illinois, and I was a vocal performance major as well as a biochemistry
Oh,
major.
wow.
Right. And so the combination of those two things really, I think, demonstrated to me that you could apply your talents in many different ways. Right. And so with regard to biochemistry, that led to a curiosity about how biological systems relate to one another. I was never really interested in a single gene or a protein, but really how the system worked. So, what factors, influenced a certain path? Could you redirect them? Could you ameliorate them? What could you really do? And so, I remember having the love of chasing electrons with Diels-Alder, reactions, and um, that was my jam in those days.
Interesting, interesting. So your interests have evolved, though, right? Now your role, your day job before the Early Onset Cancer Initiative is to lead a branch that in the Center to Reduce Cancer Health Disparities, the Community Outreach Research and Engagement branch, right?
Correct.
So that doesn't sound like biochemistry to me. So help us understand the evolution of your interests.
Yeah, absolutely. So During my training, I discovered that there needed to really be a translation. There need to be a communication or dissemination specifically to the populations that needed it most. And so communicating that to providers and then to the lay community as well as to the larger scientific community really became a passion for me. So in our branch, we have a focus on underrepresented and underserved populations because in many communities there are challenges associated with trust. There's challenges associated with how we communicate with one another, understanding cultural deference and being culturally responsive. And so our branch singly focuses in on how do we communicate specifically with regard to screening, detection, and survivorship.
Interesting work. Yeah. So it's kind of if I just want to check in if that's right, it's the desire to see a bigger impact, right? To see more change based on the science, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, one of the most recent programs that we've begun is called Connecting Underserved Populations to Clinical Trials. And it really focuses on the ability of folks in the community from racial and ethnic populations to be referred to clinical trials, not, accrual or enrollment, but being asked, being engaged to be a participant, an active participant in the biomedical research enterprise. And so I believe that, you know, that communication is facilitating cancer advances because they then have access to cutting edge technology and treatment available at our comprehensive cancer centers as well as their community partners. And so the facilitation of those linkages really results in greater public health for all.
Interesting. And I spotted in your background that you've also done some really other very interesting things that are not common, shall we say, in a more traditional science CV, if you permit. You've studied management systems design, which sounds really interesting. And then you've also worked at a consultancy company at Deloitte for a while. Help me fill out that picture of this incredible skill set that you have.
So I told you that I had a diverse background.
Yes.
And I think, again, I'm always interested in how to bring people and programs together. And so the management systems design was really working with controlled vocabularies and HL7, which are clinical standards, to be able to not only assess but also allow people to communicate better and exchange data in a standardized format. With Deloitte, I was really interested in a variety of different areas. This was during the time when PCORI first came into being, as well as precision medicine as such.
Decode PCORI for us. I'm not.
Oh,
I'm
Patient Centered Outcomes Research Institute.
okay.
So, again, looking at comparative effectiveness, disparities, a broad range of topics that really bring to bear how can we impact the patient for the better from many different lenses. And so there was a lot of interaction with other federal agencies trying to attack or, I would say address really complex issues. And for me, that's always fascinated me because I find that I always learn from those experiences. And so that kind of explains my curiosity and somewhat of my wayward path with regard to my background.
Well, I think it's a fascinating path, and one of the things I'm always interested in is sort of the I don't know what the right word is, the universality or transferability of skill sets, right? We often think of science maybe too narrowly, like it's I know how to pipette or run a column or something, but you bring all this interesting other way of thinking and managing into your work, and I wonder how that has come together to prepare you for your roles at NCI, including this brand new role of the Early Onset Initiative.
So I think back again to just my inherent focus of wanting to leave the people and the places that I find in a better state than they did when
Yeah.
I arrived. And so sometimes that is on a personal level, sometimes that's on a scientific level, but to really be able to see the development in different aspects and to have the opportunity in different settings. So, at Deloitte, sometimes it was working with industry clients, right? Sometimes here, even in the federal government, they're all mission focused. So there's a difference, but it's all to generate activities and programs and products that are for the greater good.
Yeah.
So the amalgamation of all that, I believe, really prepared me for that.
So discovery sometimes takes the limelight, right? We give Nobel Prizes for someone who makes a really amazing basic science discovery. But before that actually positively impacts lives, there is an enormous amount of work that needs to get done, and also many different ways of thinking, right?
Yeah.
That's really where you have your strengths.
I really do embrace the art of the possible, thinking outside of the current confines. My mother always used to say, if you behave the same way, you should expect to get the same results. If you approach things through this narrow lens, then this is likely to be, your outcome. So if you would like to see different outcomes, you have to be able to be flexible and encompass change. I mean, I think just the adoption of technology, right? And some of the events that have happened just on our national lens, like pertaining to structural racism, have really changed how people view not only their lives but their work.
Yeah, yeah. And I wonder if you could comment on the vantage point of being in government. I mean, these are some heavy lifts. These are some system level changes. Is government the best place to tackle that? Is it one of the places?
So I think that's a challenging question. One, because the government, for better or for worse, is a well oiled machine. And so one has to have a lot of patience. It's not always the most nimble. But there are instances in government where we have been able to pivot, right? Especially I'm thinking about the COVID pandemic, right? And
Hmm.
how everyone really changed the models that they were using. So I think there's something to be also said for stability. And there is a trust that the greater public can depend upon entities like the National Institutes of Health for sound guidance, scientific advances, and real impacts that are going to change patient lives, because that's what they depend on. So I think, again, depending upon what your perspective is, you might have a different take. But I do think that it is definitely one of the biggest jewels or assets that our country has.
Thank you very much. In closing, then, I wonder what advice you might have for a listener who is inspired by your career journey and the work that you're doing, and is thinking about finding their own path.
Yeah, so I would say that my first piece of advice would be that you should seek out mentors that can provide you with genuine insight and perspective. I wouldn't be here today if several people hadn't poured into me. And so being able to not only develop those relationships, but also develop champions, people who will really advocate for you, who know who you are, who know what you're capable of. And then also, don't be afraid to fail. um, every fail consists of basically a learning lesson. And what is considered to be failure, especially in your postdoc, when that experiment won't work or you don't get accepted for, your tenure track opportunity, recognize that you can always come back and try again. So being resilient and really focusing in on the positivity, I think, has played a great role in my trajectory and my journey.
Thank you. That's fabulous advice. Yeah, I mean, resilience is definitely important, and it's not always pain free when you acquire it.
Correct. Hmm.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. Thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to share. It's been fantastic.
We're going to jump into our Your Turn segment now, which is also our listeners' chance to share a recommendation with our audience. If you're listening and you're invited to take your turn, you can record a tip for a book, a video, a podcast, or a talk that you found inspirational or amusing or interesting, and send it to us at ncicc@nih.gov, and we'll play it in an upcoming episode. But I'd like to invite LeeAnn to take her turn.
So, again, a little non traditional. I'm not going to necessarily comply with that
Sure.
ask, but something that I did recently that I thought was amazing was to participate in float therapy. So I don't know if you've ever done this before, but basically you float in a salt water, and it has all kinds of like really great qualities with regard to health and wellness. It takes away stress, irritation on your joints, so on and so forth. And then that's combined with a dip into a freezing cold bath. And so while I absolutely would encourage one to do it, I will never do that again. That was such a shock to the system, but I believe everybody should experience it once. So again, it's called float therapy.
So are you floating in the dark as well, or is it's just the sort of weightlessness feeling that's the therapy?
It's a tub, and
Okay.
the spa can provide different lighting, and there's
Okay.
oils and
Oh,
music. It's really a holistic
that
experience.
does sound like fun. I might check that out. I might skip the plunge, but
In retrospect, it would have been so great if I had just stopped after the float. But
well, thank you. That's a great piece of advice. And I usually give a piece of a recommendation as well. But I'm going to skip that today because I want to ask our listeners to do us a favor. We have a listener survey out right now, and we're trying to get feedback on our podcast. This is our first episode in our third season. So I think we've got some episodes under our belt, but we're really open to your input. What would you like to hear? Are you enjoying the different parts of the episodes? Anything you'd like to share with us? There's going to be a link to a questionnaire in the show notes. And if you could just take a few minutes out of your day and click that link and fill out that survey, we would be very, very grateful. So thank you again, LeeAnn, for joining us. Really, it was a pleasure to talk with you today.
thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
That's all we have time for on today's episode of Inside Cancer Careers. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our guests. We want to hear from you. Your stories, your ideas, and your feedback are welcome. You can reach us at ncicc@nih.gov. Inside Cancer Careers is a collaboration between NCI's Office of Communications and Public Liaison and the Center for Cancer Training. It is produced by Angela Jones, Astrid Masvar, and Maria Moten. Join us every first and third Thursday of the month wherever you listen. Subscribe so you won't miss an episode. If you have questions about cancer or comments about this podcast, you can email us at nci.info@nih.gov or call us at 800-422-6237. And please be sure to mention Inside Cancer Careers in your query. We are a production of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute. Thanks for listening.